So, welcome to the first section in our Introduction to Radiation Therapy class. I'm Tony Tackett, Program Director for Radiation Therapy at Amarillo College. Now that I have your undivided attention, worth mentioning that most lessons in our online classes are really simply formatted so that you just click into the lesson and then read and follow the directions for the assignments. But once in a blue moon, I do get a wild hair and do one of these crazy little PowerPoint videos with narration converted into the video format. Now, anytime you have one of these, which really, by the way, isn't going to be very often, you'll watch the video and listen. And every now and then, I'll give you a keyword. When I do that, write down that keyword. In this PowerPoint, I really won't do that for every slide. So there will be some slides that you won't have a keyword, but do pay attention and make sure that you write down all the keywords and write them down in the correct order, because after you finish viewing this little ditty, you're going to be going into the part of the Section 1 folder for this class that's entitled something to the effect of Keywords Assignment for Section 1. It'll be something like that. It'll have the word keywords in it, and then you click into it, and then you're going to type in the keywords that I've stated in this PowerPoint video in the order that they were stated. This is a graded assignment, so let's get underway with your first keyword, which is all one word, sidewalk. All one word, sidewalk. So sidewalk is your first keyword. So the meat of this lesson is academic integrity. So when you think of academic integrity, what is it that really comes to mind? Well, if we look at the term integrity, it can be defined as the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. Now, one of the ways academic integrity can become an issue on college campuses is with respect to various forms of cheating, which, needless to say, represent dishonesty and not having strong moral principles with respect to the profession of radiation therapy. And here we have another definition of academic integrity. This one's from the Center for Academic Integrity, and it defines academic integrity as a commitment, even in the face of adversity, to pursue the fundamental values of honesty, trust, fairness, respect, and responsibility. Why does academic integrity matter? Well, first let me give you another keyword. The next keyword is college. So what is the value of academic integrity to, well, you? I mean, how does it affect the way you see yourself? Or does it even affect the way you see yourself? Well, I would certainly think that having academic integrity can dramatically impact the way you see who you are as a person. So does it matter only really if you get caught? Well, no. More about that in just a second. So picture this. Your roommate turned in a paper downloaded from a free essay website. How would you describe this person's character? And, well, how would you describe this person's capabilities or maybe lack thereof? And what kind of employee do you think this person will be when he or she enters the workplace? Do you really want someone like that operating a multi-million-dollar high-energy radiation therapy linear accelerator, treating cancer, a matter of life and death? Do you really want that kind of person doing that with you? I mean, this academic integrity isn't just about you. It affects you, not only you, but your peers. It affects your professors. I mean, it denigrates the college as a whole. If we don't have academic integrity, then how can our diplomas really mean anything? It denigrates the alumni, the people who worked hard to get through radiation therapy programs, employers. It belittles the national certification agency that licenses radiation therapists. It really is just bad for the profession as a whole. Just not a good thing. Oh, by the way, your next keyword is the word camera. Camera, C-A-M-E-R-A, camera. Now, there certainly might be times when you are allowed to work with somebody else in a project or something. But if you're not supposed to, and you do, that is cheating. According to the Amarillo College Student Code of Conduct and the Students' Rights and Responsibilities document, scholastic dishonesty, punishable as prescribed by board policies, shall include but not be limited to cheating on a test, plagiarism, we'll talk more about that in a bit, and collusion, which is working with someone else with the end result of cheating. Now, certainly there are times when you can work as a group and work with others, as the teachers might allow, but if teachers direct you, or if the teachers don't direct you, you should assume that you need to be working on each project individually. And if you don't do that, if you collude with other students, that could be considered cheating under most circumstances. Cheating on a test shall include things like copying from another student's test paper, using test materials not authorized by the person administering the test, especially with respect to online assignments or tests, collaborating with or seeking aid from another student during a test without permission from the test administrator, knowingly using, buying, selling, stealing, or soliciting in whole or in part the contents of a pending test. Long story short, we had a student kicked out of our program for doing this not too long back, a few years back. Continuing on, the unauthorized transporting or removal in whole or in part of the contents of the pending test, substituting for another student or permitting another student to substitute for oneself to take a test, or bribing another person to obtain a pending test or information about a pending test. Cheating in healthcare fields, well, you really can't cheat on your national licensing exam. I mean, there's just so much content and so much information and so much material, and the questions are very carefully guarded. There's just no way to cheat on your national licensing exam, or for that matter, on my exit exams, which are the exams that you have to take at the end of this program in order to graduate from the program. So if you're cheating anywhere along the way, you're just really reducing your chances of being able to be successful in these types of cumulative exams at the end of the program, because any amount of cheating in the meantime isn't going to be able to get you through the exit exams or the national board exams anyway. So why bother with it? You need to learn this stuff. You need to know it. Don't even mess with it. And also worth mentioning, many healthcare fields have an ethical code, including radiation therapy, that includes holding anyone who knew about cheating to be equally culpable. So if somebody is cheating in a class, in a test, and you know about it and you're aware of it, then whenever it comes time for you to try to become a licensed radiation therapist, that will be held against you, and that can block you from even becoming a radiation therapist. Or if you're already a radiation therapist and you share information about past tests or something like that, then that can result in you losing your license to practice radiation therapy. Now imagine after you leave a class, a friend who has not yet taken the online exam asks you about the content of the exam. So suppose you've taken an online exam, you just finished it. Then somebody from the class who hasn't quite yet logged in talks to you or asks you about that test. Do you think this conversation might have an effect on your friend's education on the whole? Well, what about you and your fellow students' education? How would you handle such a situation? You might really kind of just think of ways to approach things like this. One of the things that we're going to talk about now and again, especially in the clinical environment, is how to address questions that might come up, like questions from patients and whatnot. This is one of those things that you might just want to have something pat thought of ahead of time about how you might handle some sort of situation like this. If you already have this kind of worked out or rehearsed in your mind ahead of time, then it makes it a lot easier to not feel ambushed if such a situation occurs, which I hope it never does. But you just ought to be prepared anyway. What if, say you're the head of your department at work, radiation therapy or whatever, and one of your employees called in sick that day, but then later that night you saw them at a concert and they didn't see you? What would you think? I remember my high school band director telling the story of how he called in sick, air quotes, sick, one day from his high school, and he ran up to Shamrock, Texas, where they had a big St. Patrick's Day parade and festival and party going on. And the evening news, the local news channel, went over there to videotape it, and there he was in full glory celebrating with everybody else St. Patrick's Day when he was supposed to be sick in bed, and it was aired on TV that night. Yeah, in-school suspension was not very fun for him. So why do students cheat? Well, let's take a look at sort of an Amarillo College case study. First off, I want to just kind of pose the question to you. Why do you think students cheat? There's probably lots of reasons. Certainly there's things like maybe they don't feel prepared for an exam. Maybe they didn't have time to prepare. They feel like they didn't because of work or family or outside stresses, relationships or whatever. Worries about grades, trying to make good grades. There can be a variety of reasons that people might cheat. By the way, your next keyword is simply the number 42. The number 42. So an Amarillo College case study, I alluded to a student that was caught cheating and kicked out of the program earlier. Well, what really basically happened was this person was very bright, had straight A's coming into the program. I assume it was on the up and up, but I guess in retrospect I just don't know for sure. But this student was very bright, very intelligent, highly intelligent. But frankly, I think he just was being lazy. and maybe part of him just wanted to see if he could get away with it. But long story short, he didn't get away with it. He got caught, and not only was he he failed the class, of course, but he was also kicked out of the program. We involved the Amarillo College police. We had hearings, and this student was basically expelled from Amarillo College, and the student now has this showing up on his transcript wherever he might go. So I guess that's other food for thought with respect. I'm kind of preaching to the choir. You're not going to cheat, but don't even think about it, because the consequences if you get caught are just astonishingly high. Just really bad stuff happens. And like I said earlier, there's just no sense in it anyway, because you're going to have to be able to pass all these comprehensive exams anyway that you simply can't cheat your way out of. So don't even think about it or getting in the habit. One thing I think about, though, is I remember I had a teacher in a graduate class at university who said, okay, I'll let you guys write a cheat sheet, and you can bring this 8.5 by 11 regular paper-sized cheat sheet in for the test. And the test covered 400 pages of a book, so it was a massively huge test. And what I found is that I spent so much time writing up this little cheat sheet and typing it up and making it small font, and then photocopying it and making it even smaller font, so that I brought like a little hand lens and a magnifying glass in, along with my glasses, so I could maybe read the stuff, and I had it printed on a good laser printer. So I had maybe like 20 pages worth of material printed out on this one sheet. And I found that just in really refining and copying all this information and knowing what was on it and what was where on the sheet, by the time I got to the test, I knew the information so well, I really didn't even need the sheet. So while many of us kind of chuckled thinking, he's letting us taking in a cheat sheet, it ended up working out to be a pretty effective strategy for getting us to study by writing down this information and having it put in a way that was comprehensive and cohesive for us so that we could understand it. And in doing that, we learned the information fairly well right then and there. Online cheating. Would you consider having another student do your online homework or take your online tests for you? Frankly, they probably wouldn't do very well if they tried to. But anyway, maybe even things like collaborating with other students when taking an online test, or referring to notes or textbooks even though the test is not an open book test. Most of our tests are not open book. In the ethics and law class, we do have some open book tests, but by and large, testing is not online. Testing is not open note or open book. So unless I specifically state that a test is open text or open book, then it is not. Now, with online cheating, you would kind of think, if I ask, are students more likely to cheat online? It seems like there's more avenues to be able to do that online, but I was actually kind of surprised. Oh, by the way, before I get into this, next keyword is the word truck, like pickup truck. Next keyword is truck. When asked, are students more likely to cheat online, I was a little bit surprised, but pleased actually to find out that it's about the same, really, whether or not students are taking online classes or face-to-face classes with respect to cheating. Plagiarism, that's a term I mentioned a little while ago, so what the heck is that? Well, let's take a look on our next slide. Plagiarism is when a writer deliberately uses someone else's language, ideas, or other original, not common knowledge material without acknowledging its source, or the act of presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own. Next keyword, by the way, is the word idea. Idea is the next keyword. So effectively, plagiarism is like what many of us thought was okay to do. It really wasn't, but teachers let us get away with doing a lot in elementary school, is where you are given an assignment and you just go to Wiki and or some website and just copy and paste, and just kind of word for word copy and paste. If you do that, that's plagiarism. That's presenting someone else's work or ideas as your own, and that's academic dishonesty. So here's an example of what we did way back in the days. I didn't write this report, but I printed it directly from the internet, but I did all the stapling and collating myself. Yay. So why do students plagiarize? Well, let's check out some common responses. Plagiarism and reasons include things like confusion about what constitutes plagiarism. Really, what you can do typically is you can take somebody's ideas and put it into your own words. You still should like cite that source, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Acknowledge that you got this information from a certain person. But as long as you kind of rearrange it in a completely your own way, that typically ends up being okay. Another reason is procrastination or poor time management, where people are just kind of like, I ran out of time, so they just kind of like copy and paste stuff because it's already written there, and it's just easier to do. And there's a perception that it's common behavior and therefore acceptable. It was common when, at least when my kid was reporting that he was in grade school, but it's still not acceptable. It's still academic dishonesty, and it's still cheating. You will still get full penalties for cheating if you're caught with plagiarism. There's also competition for grades and a perception of too much academic work and a diminishing sense of academic integrity, where people just maybe don't value academic integrity like they ought to or should. I kind of fell under the category of the first one, about confusion about what constitutes plagiarism. When I was at university, we weren't really taught much about this. Of course, we didn't have the internet back then, so that wasn't as easy. But nonetheless, I didn't really know much about it. So I'd have been probably tempted just out of lack of understanding of what constituted plagiarism. More reasons for possible plagiarism is easy access to electronic text. I mean, information is right at our hands. And back in my days, in the old days, we had to go to the library physically to get information. Then we had to look up microfilm or microfiche. That's old time stuff. Boy, let me tell you, it was hard to get information back in my days. So there's just a lot more information available in easy access to the information now. Next is perceived irrelevance of the subject matter. If it's not important to somebody, then they may just get lazy or sloppy about it. No concept of intellectual property, that it's, like the music industry fights with this, with pirating and whatnot, that intellectual property is valuable, and it's really technically can be against the law to do these kinds of things. There's an increased pressure due to a winner-take-all society. Worth noting, we have software here at Amarillo College that checks for plagiarism. It's really cool. I can either click a single click and do it, or just set it to automatically do it, and it's really neat. In less than a second when I click onto it, it'll look at something that's been submitted, like an essay or something, and it'll show everywhere, I mean everywhere on the internet where this appears. And it'll show it like highlighted where you see it in context of where it is and how much of it was taken word for word. And it gives you like a report on the percent of the paper that is plagiarized. And again, it shows you all the sites that it came from. It's incredibly accurate and an amazing software technology that we have access to that can check for these kinds of things. Is it ethical? Yes or no? Okay. Before we get going on this, your next keyword is the word magazine. Magazine. So, read these next 7 slides. Actually, I'll read them to you, just so that I know that way you'll have enough time to hear it, because I don't want to just kind of guess as to whether or not you've had enough time to read it as I continue making the audio recording to throw onto this PowerPoint video. So you're going to have the next 7 slides, and I want you to make notes of your thoughts. Then go to the Is It Ethical assignment, which is found in the Section 1 folder, and write down yes or no to each of these 7 items, and type a justification for each of these answers for the next 7 slides, starting with number 1 below. So you write number 1, and then I'll go ahead and read this to you. Tyrone is given an assignment from his instructor. He works with another student to figure out the confusing elements of the homework assignment, but does his own work. Is that ethical? Yes or no? So you're going to write, basically I want you to get some scratch paper, maybe hit pause right now so you can go grab some scratch paper and something to write with, and then write yes or no, and then maybe jot down a couple of ideas with respect to justifications for why you write yes or no. And then we're going to go on to the next slide, and the next slide, do the same thing, and so on and so on. Then you're going to again go back to the Is It Ethical assignment and type all this stuff into that area. So that finishes with this first one, now that you've heard this one. So, is it ethical? Number 2, Jenny turns in a paper where chunks of material were copied and pasted directly from the original work. She cites the information correctly. That is, she writes all about where she got the information from, like what the author was, the book or magazine or whatever is from, the pages numbers and all that information. She cites that information correctly within the paper and on her work's cited page, like a bibliography that she might have to turn in with her assignment. Is that ethical? Yes or no? Why or why not? Is it ethical? Number 3, Molly's best friend Olivia skipped class and has Molly sign her in on the attendance roll. I'm thinking you ought to be able to get that one pretty easy. Next example, number 4, is it ethical? Jane is in Chemistry 111, which has 3 sections taught by the same instructor. She has a friend in another class, another section, who is taking a test in that class before her. After the test, Jane's friend tells her what to study based on the questions on her test. Is that ethical? Yes or no? Is it ethical? Number 5, Lauren took a class with Dr. Fowler, where she wrote a paper on the topic of political campaigns in relation to the influence on voter turnout. The next semester, she enrolls in a marketing class where she received an assignment to write about any kind of marketing and its effects on a consumer. Lauren decides to turn in the paper she wrote for Dr. Fowler to her marketing class as well. So she's double dipping, turning in one paper for 2 different classes. Is that ethical? Yes or no? Why or why not? Is it ethical? Number 6. Carlos is writing a research paper and sends his paper to his mom to proofread. Is that okay? Yes or no? Why or why not? And lastly, is it ethical? Number 7. Ashley and Tamika are both writing papers on the topic of civil liberties. Ashley shows Tamika her outline and asks for feedback on how to improve it. Is that ethical? Yes or no? Why or why not? Citing sources. I kind of alluded to this earlier. Now, you've seen source citations, which are like bibliographies at the end of an article or a book. If you haven't or don't remember, take a look at the end of any chapter of any textbook or at the back end of the textbook, where it lists all the resources where they got their information from. That's what they're doing there, is citing their sources. Now, the next bullet says more about how to properly do this, how to properly cite sources in a later course. But for now, here's some tidbits about at least why citing sources is important. So here's some reasons as to why we cite our sources. Well, it helps us avoid plagiarism, because if we cite our sources, then that helps us establish that we got this information from another source and we're not trying to pass it off as our own information, our own understanding and knowledge. Also, it establishes context for material. It gives information, all the information all around the information, to be able to give it that context to make it make more sense. And it helps the reader identify and locate the sources too. If they want to find out more information on their own, they can look at the sources to get more detailed information. Whenever I've had to do my own research papers, one thing I found to be really helpful is if I find one really good article, then at the end of the article it has their sources cited, their bibliography. And lots of times I can find all the rest of the articles that I'll need by looking at those articles in the bibliography. Those are oftentimes a great resource. So that gives the information to the reader about the sources. It also gives the reader an idea as to the legitimacy of your claims, because they can look at your sources and see if they're good sources, or if they're things like, some just like online blog who is just giving their opinion rather than giving actual facts and data based on research. Also, it acknowledges the authors who contributed to the information. So that's giving just due to the people who actually dug up and found out the information on their own. So when should you cite your sources? Basically, anytime you're writing a paper where you give statistics, then those statistics came from somewhere. Cite where you got those stats. Also, when the information is unique and not known by most people, as opposed to common knowledge. Cite your sources whenever you think that somebody reading your article or your essay or whatever might be asking, now, how do you know that? You can say, well, I know it from the research done by so-and-so. Cite your sources when you use a direct quotation from somebody else. If you use quotes, then we want to know where that quote came from. Cite whenever you use someone else's ideas. Again, you don't want to present somebody else's ideas as your own, because that's plagiarism. Cite again when you quote someone, mentioned that already. Cite when you paraphrase or direct quotation from somebody else. Now, I said earlier that if you paraphrase, you make your own words about an idea. That's usually okay, but if it's too close to the original information or the original ideas, then just to be careful, you ought to cite that source. Even if you're using your own words about the information, best to just go ahead and cite that source just to be sure and be on the safe side. Now, you don't have to cite your sources if the information is commonly known. So like if you write down that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, or that the solar system consists of X number of planets and Earth is the 3rd planet, that's common knowledge information. You don't have to cite sources about that kind of information. Don't cite sources if it's your own original thought or idea, although I would say it's probably a good idea to state this is your own original thought or idea just to avoid any confusion about that. Basically, a good rule of thumb is if you're not sure as to whether or not you should cite a source, go ahead and cite a source. If you're not sure, when in doubt, cite the source. By the way, this is really handy information to know. Any Amarillo College student can make an appointment with the Writer's Corner, which is located on the Washington Street campus, to ask them if you should cite sources or really for general writing help, formatting, style, etc. You can contact them at the phone number there, or if you're online and you live far away, you can submit your papers in a word processing document, Microsoft Word. You can submit the papers. There's an email address there you can submit them to, and 24 to 48 hours for a turnaround on getting back to you, except on weekends. But they'll get back to you and give you helpful hints. By the way, with respect to an earlier, is it ethical kind of question, here's something that's kind of a hint. The Writer's Corner is allowed to review your writings, your papers, or whatever you're submitting, and they can give you information and tell you if you're formatted it correctly, if your style is correct. They can basically proofread it for you and maybe even give you some helpful hints and ideas that can make your paper even better. So anytime you have any kind of paper to turn in and you're an Amarillo College student, contact the Writer's Corner because they can make your paper better. They will make your paper better, and you can get better grades in a way that's perfectly fine with respect to ethics. So take full advantage of this opportunity with respect to the Writer's Corner. By the way, your next keyword is the word coffee. Coffee. Last slide, reach for success, not the answers. Very profound wisdom there. And your last keyword is actually two words, Writer's Corner. Just like in the previous slide, writers with an apostrophe S, corner, two words. Thank you much for listening.